It's Monday, January 16. In the headlines, locally, amendments to the Offenses Against the Persons Act will reinforce death penalty for capital murder. In business, edufocal among delegation to Guyana. In the region, new Omicron vaccines are coming soon. Internationally, California is under a major storm declaration after weeks of rain. And in sports, West Indies under 19 women beat Ireland in T20 World Cup. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Maya Chung. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the amendments to be made to the Offenses Against the Persons Act will clarify and reinforce that the punishment for capital murder in Jamaica is the death penalty. Prime Minister Andrew Holness indicated somehow, somewhere, it has gotten into the minds of Jamaican criminals that this is not the case, and that after 15 years, sometimes with good behavior, they will exit prison. The PM indicates that they are going to disabuse them of that idea and make it clear in the amendments that the penalty for capital murder is the death penalty, and where that is not applied, it is life imprisonment without parole. The Prime Minister added that for non-capital murder, he had heard a suggestion of 40 years before any consideration of parole, and he is inclined to that idea. He added that he thinks it's a wonderful suggestion and should be up to 45 years. The Prime Minister was addressing a national security seminar hosted by the Office of the National Security Advisor at the AC Hotel in Kingston on January 12, where he highlighted various legislative measures to address crime. Among them is the new Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulations Act 2022, which provides penalties ranging from 15 years to life imprisonment for breaches. The legislation establishes a dual regime distinguishing between prohibited weapons or unregulated firearms and activities connected thereto, and firearms that are duly authorized or registered. More than 80 persons have been charged so far under the new act, which came into operation on November 1, 2022. Turning to the Bail Act, which is before Parliament, the Prime Minister said it will streamline the process of bail by giving greater clarity and hopefully ensure that Jamaica does not have a revolving door for criminals. In addition, he noted that the cybersecurity legislative framework has been strengthened and the cybersecurity strategy is being updated. He further informed that the Fingerprints Act is to be amended this legislative year to ensure that the law is in keeping with available technology, and the process to amend the Corrections Act is underway. He noted that there is now a new offender management policy which will form the broader foundation for the amendments to the Corrections Act. Plans are also in place to reform the law reform zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act to ensure that it is more effective. A National Security Act is also under consideration and is to be drafted. Chairman of the Jamaica Coffee Exporters Association, JCEA, Norman Washington Grant, promises that players in the coffee sector will be heightening their focus on marketing and increased production expansion aimed at Jamaica Blue Mountain Coffee and Jamaica High Mountain Coffee, with a view to raising the product's global profile to benefit the Jamaican economy. His remarks came against the background of the commemoration of World Coffee Day, celebrated on January 9, 2023. Chairman of the Jamaica Coffee Exporters Association, JCEA, and CEO and Managing Director of the Mavis Bank Coffee Factory, Norman Grant, notes that the celebration is taking place in collaboration with the industry's 5,000 coffee farmers, the Jamaica Agricultural Commodities Regulatory Authority, JACRA, Jamaica Promotions Corporation, JAMPRO, the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and the AJIJC. The Japanese market now purchases 70% of Jamaica's export of coffee, the USA 20%, and Europe and the rest of the world 10%. The Jamaica Coffee Exporters Association, in partnership with AJIJC and the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, is currently focusing on marketing expansion simultaneously with an expansion in production, which is aimed at increasing the production of Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee and Jamaica High Mountain coffee. This is geared towards growing from the current 270,000 boxes to 450,000 boxes per annum over the next 4 years through an investment of $1 billion in the coffee sector over the next 5 years, according to Norman Washington Grant. He adds that those efforts should help to increase revenues from Jamaica's coffee industry from a weighted average of US $25 million per annum over the last 15 years to US $50 million per annum and an incremental 5% annual growth rate over the next 10 years. This will create an industry with annual sales of US $100 million and will significantly return the coffee industry to consistent profitability and contribute to improving the economic prospects of our 5,000 farmers, thousands of farm families, and our coffee businesses, according to Mr. Grant. Grant explains that the capital investments will benefit both the Jamaica Blue Mountain and High Mountain coffee industry and, by extension, the country through both import substitution, job creation, and the development of the rural and national economies. This year's celebrations will feature loyalty specials and discounts, the tasting experience at coffee outlets, both locally and internationally, the promotions of Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee in local and overseas markets, including Japan, Europe, the USA, and China. The Jamaica Constabulary Force JCF is intensifying its recruitment exercise this year as the organization looks to increase the complement of law enforcement personnel serving island-wide. Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson informed that approximately 1,260 new constables were recruited during the last exercise. He said the JCF is seeking to do another similar number this year, and for the first time in at least probably 10 to 15 years, the JCF can actually see growth in the force. He said the JCF is seeking to do another similar number this year, and for the first time in at least probably 10 to 15 years, the JCF can actively see growth in the force. He added that the recruitment is now at 12,500, coming from approximately just over 11,000. He added that by the end of this calendar year, the JCF will probably be over 13,000. The commissioner was speaking during a national security seminar hosted by the Office of the National Security Advisor at the AC Marriott Hotel in Kingston recently. Recruits have been improved with additional facilities and a cadre of instructors capable of consistently delivering the curriculum. Mr. Anderson added that there are 4 training facilities, and those 4 are allowing the JCF to produce this number of officers. Further, the standards and quality at each of these institutions, he said, is consistent. Additionally, Major General Anderson informed that steps are being taken to ensure that the JCF's main training facility is accredited. And it's now time for the business report with Danita Rodney.
Online learning company EduFocal Limited has been named among a delegation that will embark on a trip to Guyana later this month. The educational technology solutions provider will join Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce Senator Albin Hill on a scheduled visit to Guyana from January 23 to January 28. While there, CEO Gordon Swaby says the company's goal is to create partnership opportunities while gaining a deeper understanding of the Guyana market. For EduFocal, this visit is a part of its plan for regional expansion. Now for your market updates. In foreign exchange trading for Friday, January 13, the US dollar sold for an average of $153.56. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $116.83. The pound sterling traded for $185.73, and the euro sold for $168.58. In JSE trading, the JSE index advanced by 2,244 points. The junior market index declined by 37 points. The combined market index advanced by 1,746 points, and the all Jamaican composite index advanced by 3,343 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 107 stocks, of which 46 advanced, 46 declined, and 15 traded firm. Stocks advanced for Berger Paints Jamaica Limited, Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited, and Caribbean Cement Company Limited. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, Access Financial Services Limited, and AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited. Trading firm were 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Weber Preference, Siboney Group Limited, and Consolidated Bakeries Jamaica Limited. The overall volume leaders were Massey Holdings Limited with over 1 million units, Fosrich Company Limited with over 800,000 units, and Regency Petroleum Company Limited with over 700,000 units. In regional stocks, on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, 0 securities were traded. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Barbados Farms Limited was the volume leader with over 16,000 shares. They were followed by Goddard Enterprises Limited, which traded over 7,000 shares. In regional business, according to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean (ECLAC) report, Trinidad and Tobago is the best exporter in the region for 2022.
TNT's exports increased by an estimated 69%. In addition, the Central Statistical Office indicated in 2022, total exports were at 83.2 billion TT dollars, which far surpasses the export growth in 2019, valued at 48.6 billion TT dollars, a 71% increase in exports. Energy exports make up the bulk of the increase at 66.4 billion TT dollars, while non-energy exports were valued at 16.8 billion TT dollars. Exports in the food and beverage sector were valued at $3.1 billion in 2022, with the top exported commodities being water, pre-cooked and prepared food from cereals, aromatic bitters, other non-alcoholic beverages, and chocolate and cocoa preparations. The Ministry of Trade and Industry said for 2023, it is continuing the implementation of initiatives aimed at achieving a further increase in non-energy exports. The ministry added this increase will ultimately generate more foreign exchange and new job opportunities.
In international business, big U.S. banks have reportedly stockpiled more rainy day funds to prepare for a possible recession, while showing caution about forecasting income growth as the economy remains uncertain.
Wall Street's biggest banks kicked off the fourth quarter earnings season with cautious outlooks on Friday, saying they stockpiled more rainy day funds to be ready for a possible recession, setting aside a total of roughly $4 billion to prepare for soured loans. JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America reported quarterly profit that beat estimates, while profit at Wells Fargo and Citigroup fell short of forecasts. But Reuters' U.S. finance editor Lenan Nguyen said it was the notes of caution about the U.S. economy that had the attention of investors.
The 4 banks that reported earnings today were basically in line with expectations of, setting up some preparations for a worsening economy this year. So while the banks reported results that were basically decent, what was really important was the commentary from the CEOs today, and the markets were listening for any sense that they were seeing worsening figures in their businesses or any trouble by the U.S. consumers. Right now, it sounds like U.S. consumers are holding up fairly well. They've still got money in their accounts, and a lot of people are still very well employed, and so there isn't this kind of disastrous tailing off of the economy in the consumer segment. But what the CEOs did mention was that, they're very careful about what's to come. The outlook is extremely uncertain. And so they're flagging up a lot of these risk factors that could start to affect the economy in the later half of this year.
The risks highlighted by bank executives included geopolitical tensions as well as stubbornly high inflation, which has led to the Federal Reserve's fastest rate hiking cycle since the 1980s to cool demand in the U.S. economy. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said U.S. consumers remained healthy, but that he didn't yet know the, quote, ultimate effect of the headwinds coming. Bank of America chief Brian Moynihan also acknowledged a, quote, increasingly slowing economic environment.
We're hearing the word mild quite a bit, in mild recession, that the economic slowdown isn't going to be really, really catastrophic, that it's going to be a shallower slowdown. That remains to be seen. And they definitely hedged by saying there are many risk factors that could affect that outlook. But for now, the bank CEOs and executives, they are warning about more pessimistic scenario, but they're still not, ringing any alarm bells.
Shares of the big banks were higher in afternoon trading, reversing declines in the morning. Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs report earnings next week.
In market data for oil prices held near this year's high as easing COVID restrictions in China raised expectations for a demand recovery in the world's top crude importer. Brent crude fell 41 cents to $84.87 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate crude was down 28 cents at $79.58 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Denida Rodney.
In regional news, out of Barbados, a fresh round of COVID-19 vaccinations could be on the horizon if the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA, has its way. This is coming from CARPHA's Executive Director, Dr. Joyce St. John, while speaking to CBC News.
Have been some newer, mainly mRNA, newer vaccines produced specific to Omicron. And we've noticed that offers of donations have been coming both from Europe and North America to the region. So we also had a discussion about that. We had a discussion about if someone had COVID-19 before, if they need to get immunized. And I told him very much so, because the immunity would be to earlier forms of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and not necessarily what is now circulating. There needs to be a decision about switching to what's available, the newer vaccines, especially now that they have got the WHO emergency use listing. So we had a discussion about that. We had a discussion about this whole issue of the donations and what would be required. You know that CARPHA is very careful to check that what is coming into the region is of good standard and quality, and it is precisely what it says it should be. We don't want any thing coming in that is not what we need.
Grenada's Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell says it's best to get it right than to rush and get it wrong, as his administration gets ready to name new ambassadors who will head up the country's diplomatic missions.
Government says it is working to rebuild the country's diplomatic service with a new cadre of diplomats as it prepares to soon make public the names of people appointed to diplomatic missions.
So I appreciate that the general public may seem 6 months has passed and we haven't named most of our diplomats. And that is true, but that is the reality we face. And it is better for us to get it right and get it right slowly than to rush ahead and get it wrong. So to that extent, we certainly expect that in the next 2 weeks or so, we will be making the necessary announcements as to who will be heading up our missions in the respective embassies across the world.
Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell said there is a large pool of people who have expressed interest in being appointed ambassadors, and government is going through the vetting process. He said not only will ambassadors be named, but also deputies who can provide the necessary support. The Grenadian leader said that individuals appointed will need to understand what is expected of them.
And so we now have to build an entire cadre of new diplomats, which means recruiting, training, educating, and stamping what we want out of our diplomats and the standards we expect. That is going to take time. So it's not just a question of saying John Brown is a diplomat, right? When they've had no diplomatic experience, no diplomatic training, understanding what it is to be a diplomat first and foremost, and second, what do we want out of our missions and our embassies, right?
He said a number of exercises must take place before people are appointed as ambassadors.
If you actually look at who have been our diplomats and the number of missions, and the number of honorary councils and so on that has been in place, you will see that to some extent the diplomatic corps, Grenada's diplomatic corps, the support staff, the support structure has been decimated. There are no career diplomats, and those who are left are not forthcoming as diplomats.
The disclosure was made during GBN's Beyond the Headlines Monday night. He said while diplomats have been recalled, the public must be mindful that their return will not be immediate, as there are some issues that surround the recall of diplomats, such as their preparations for themselves and their families. Cherry and Blackman Stephen, GBN News.
In Guyana, as the Budget 2023 presentation by Senior Finance Minister Ashley Singh approaches, many Guyanese are hopeful that the budget will address the needs of public servants and provide tangible assistance to alleviate the high cost of living.
Due to Guyana's thriving oil and gas sector, and with approximately $600 million in the Natural Resources Fund, several citizens call on the government to proverbially up their game in salary increases for civil servants, and more so devise measures to tackle the uncontrollable inflation rate.
Our country is one of the most richest countries as of now, and still we have people crying out for salary because we have needs.
An elderly woman called for the increase in the old age pension as she bewailed that things are really rough.
Pension.
The pension,
yes.
Well, I'm glad if it could raise a couple dollars more every year. Because the bills then for paying, and then you have to eat whole month, and the money can't even do for you for eat more.
Give public servants something better, because we are a producing nation. Yes. We know to be something better.
Meanwhile, another citizen opined that the 2023 budget should be scrapped as it will not be inclusive.
The budget needs to be dropped. Everything is totally high.
No, I said the cost is too high.
Yes, the cost of living is too high at this moment right now.
Budget 2023 will be the fourth presented to Parliament by the People's Progressive Party since its ascension to office in August 2020, and is expected to see critical development programs for the country. With the final deposit made in the Natural Resource Fund, NRF, for 2022, the government is expected to withdraw a total of $1.7, which equates to 209 billion Guyana dollars, which will be available for use in the 2023 budget. Antonio Day reporting for the HEP Nightly News.
In the Bahamas, Bar Association President Khalil Parker says the association is looking forward to the implementation of new pieces of legislation, and topping that list is the Freedom of Information Act.
The Freedom of Information Act is a fundamental step forward in substantive accountability of the executive branch, and what we need to see is the demonstration of the government's commitment to bringing that into full force. The commissioner has been appointed, a deputy commissioner and support staff. They are rolling out the program with some testing departments of government. I understand that, but it is a matter of urgency that we get this particular exercise behind us.
In addition, Parker says they're looking forward to the revised Legal Professions Act and Court Services Bill. The Court Services Bill is described as integral to the judiciary's ability to respond to a number of structural issues.
As you note, we had the opening ceremonies at Margaritaville, which was lovely, but we want to be back in the courts. And as I indicated in my speech, we're looking forward to the development of a purpose-built Supreme Court complex, again at the East Hill Street site. But we believe that that is an essential step in consolidating the court infrastructure.
In international news, Californians are now facing a terrible time weather-wise, with lives lost, property damage, and a state of major disaster being their state of living until the weather woes stop.
Muddy water and debris blanketing much of the state of California. One area getting half the precipitation it usually gets in a year in just 16 days. The reason, 8 so-called atmospheric rivers in a row since late December.
And here we are, by some estimates, 22 to 25 trillion gallons of water have fallen over the course of the last 16, 17 days, a stacking of these atmospheric rivers, the likes of which we've not experienced in our lifetimes.
Atmospheric rivers are long streams of moisture from the tropics. They get caught in the jet stream and carry tremendous amounts of water. This is just the latest one, flooding Caitlin Clancy's home 3 times since the beginning of the month.
And the cleanup was awful, but you know, we cleaned it up, and then next thing you know, fast forward like 6 days was it? I don't know. We're flooding again, so we were in shock because even though we prepped for it, we didn't prep for it to get as high as it had. And so that was even more mess and more destruction.
It's impacting much of the state, in the mountains, dumping 54 centimeters of snow in just 24 hours. In the hills charred by wildfires, the soil is unable to retain much moisture. In the long term, that means all of this rain will do little to ease California's drought. Right now, it's causing major mudslides and sending massive boulders into valleys. Roads are being washed away, sinkholes making travel impossible. And in drought-stricken California, thousands of trees weakened by the floods are now being knocked down by wind gusts of up to 96 kilometers an hour. People have been killed and power knocked out for tens of thousands. This major emergency declaration will allow cities and states to use some federal money to help cover the costs of the rescues and the recovery. It will provide grants to people who need to find temporary shelters or make minor repairs. For those who don't have insurance, they can get low-interest loans from the government to help them rebuild. More people will need that help. The next atmospheric river is expected to hit Sunday evening and last through Monday. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
In sports, Zeta James put in a gritty all-round performance versus Ireland to guide the West Indies under-19 women's team to victory in their first match of the ICC Women's Under-19 T20 World Cup in South Africa. TTT Sports has the details.
Batting first after the Irish won the toss, the West Indies posted 125 for 3 in their 20 overs, with James topping the scorers with 52. Nijani Cumberbatch chipped in with 21 not out, with the other big contribution being 24, which came from the extras column due to some erratic Irish bowling. James then went about putting in a sterling effort with the ball to defend that score. The 18-year-old left-handed Lucian taking 4 wickets at the cost of 20 runs in 4 overs, including the wickets of Ireland captain Amy Hunter for 21 and top scorer Annabel Squires, who hit 42, as they could only manage 118 for 7 in their allotment of overs. The West Indies under-19 women winning by 7 runs as James easily walks away with the Player of the Match honours. They next face Indonesia on Tuesday from 7:45 a.m. Eastern Caribbean time. Elsewhere in South Africa, in Group B, the 3 Lions women opened their tournament with a statement win, defeating Zimbabwe by 174 runs. England amassed 199 for the loss of 4 wickets before wrapping up their defence in a tight 12 overs. Zimbabwe out for just 25 runs. Pakistan also picked up their first W with an 8-wicket victory over Rwanda. Set 106 for the win, Pakistan women reached the total in 17.5 overs for the loss of 2 wickets. In Group C, New Zealand made light work of their chase, reaching their total in 9.3 overs. Indonesia made 74 for 7 in their 20 overs. The Black Caps women reached 77 without loss to wrap up the 10-wicket victory with 63 balls remaining.
And that's the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Maya Chung. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBC Jamaica. Thank you for watching.